Do you have tips on preventing hamstring pulls while sprinting? Oh, yes, I do. Either exercises or technique cues. I've been having an issue with those when hitting top speed. Tips on preventing hamstring pulls while sprinting. Exercises or technique cues. So, number one, in my experience, 20 plus years watching people sprint, number one cause of hamstring pulls when sprinting is overstriding. Period. If you could send me a video of you sprinting, give me a side view of you sprinting full speed, I guarantee if you're having hamstring issues, your foot is landing out in front of your hip. And when that happens, foot lands out in front of your hip while you're running full speed. Your hamstring is in that lengthened position at full speed. It hits the ground. Pop goes the hammy. That's how it happens. And it is so freaking common. So why is that so common? There's could be a number of reasons, and I'm sure like these elite level, track and field coaches can give you those. I'm gonna keep it super simple and give you the main reason I've seen with most athletes, and a lot of non-track athletes. I will kind of give that disclaimer, but I feel one of the main issues with most people is a lack of eccentric hamstring strength. So I talked about right before your foot strikes the ground that it's called the late swing phase of the sprint. Right when that foot is about to make contact with the ground, the hamstrings are contracting eccentrically, right? They're contracting eccentrically to decelerate that lower leg. And that deceleration basically prevents the lower leg from extending too far out. If the knee does end up extending too far out, you don't have that eccentric hamstring strength to decelerate the lower leg enough so it extends all the way out. The foot is going to strike the ground out in front of the hip. And as I mentioned, there's your number one cause of hamstring pulls. That foot landing and that overstriding and that foot landing out in front of the hip. So this is why eccentric hamstring strength is so important. Everybody will tell you, oh yeah, man, you want to run faster? Everybody knows you need strong glutes, you need strong hamstrings, you need strong legs in general. But people now know the quote unquote posterior chain is king, et cetera, but they leave out the part where a little asterisk that says, yes, super important, but maybe even more important, if you have to pick the most important, especially for preventing hamstring pulls, I'm going to say not just hamstring strength, eccentric hamstring strength. So my personal favorite, I like performing eccentric, I guess you would call them leg curls, eccentric leg curls, lying on your back with furniture sliders, or the Val Slide is the name of the brand we have, but you could go to Home Depot and buy furniture sliders. I like those, laying on your back, eccentric leg curls with the furniture sliders, as opposed to a leg curl machine, because in that position, you're kind of in that bridge or hip thrust position, glute bridge position, whatever you want to call it. The glutes are involved to a greater degree. When you just lay down on your stomach and do eccentric hamstring curls, not so much glute activity, if any. All right, so those are my favorites. I think I'll make a note. I have a video. It's not a standalone video. There's I could picture it. I have like a compilation video of a workout on my YouTube channel, and that exercise is shown. So I will make myself a note to put that link in the show notes. Make sure you're checking the show notes out. that's one of the top ones to pop in my head, that exercise. Going hand in hand with that, a great superset. You're gonna incorporate those into your workout instead of just standing around for a minute or two, between each set. Pair that with whatever your favorite hip flexor flexibility or hip flexor mobility drill is, whether it's, smashing the hip flexor with a lacrosse ball and a kettlebell or a barbell, or just a good old fashioned half kneeling hip flexor stretch, whatever it may be, do whatever you like to do best for lengthening the hip flexors, because that in conjunction with eccentric hamstring strength, that's your ultimate recipe. Because when your hip flexors get tight and locked up, which 99% of you listening have, you get that anterior pelvic tilt, which basically places constant tension on your hamstrings. If they're in constant tension, now at full speed, have them strike the ground in a lengthened position. It's no surprise why so many people pull their hamstrings. So that's my favorite 1-2 punch right there. I would also incorporate upright sled drags, or Louis Simmons calls it power walking with the sled. You guys know I talk a lot about heavy ass sled drags, which are great, but they're more for acceleration, the first 10 to 20 yards or meters of your sprint, where you have that forward body lean, and that same lean when you drag a heavy sled is great, but that's going to hit more your quads and your glutes. You want to hit more of your hamstrings, go upright, and have your foot, your heel, and this is just for sled dragging. This isn't for when you sprint, but for the strength exercise, have your heel strike the ground. And in this case, you actually want to take big steps, and you can have your foot strike the ground out in front of you and then pull back and fully extend and walk in that fashion. So big strides, walking upright with the sled. You're not going to be able to go nearly as heavy as when you do a forward lean and you're grabbing, a rope or the straps, the sled straps. In this case, it's best to have the weight around your waist, put like a weight belt on, have the sled strap around the weight belt, and you're just walking upright, big strides, heel strikes, pull back. Great way to strengthen hip extension. And the concentric only action of the sled is great for people who are doing a lot of sprinting. So if it's kind of like in-season sprinting, it's a great way to keep your hamstrings strong without having a ton of soreness and the damage, associated with the eccentric training. So it's kind of like the eccentric leg curls is more of an off season, when that's where you're going to build the foundation before you start doing a lot of sprints. Once you start doing more sprints, I'm not saying you don't ever, perform any eccentric training, but something like the upright sled drags play a role, because they just won't make you as sore. All right. Moving right along.